Welcome to the review where I'm probably gonna mess up a bunch of names. I am sorry in advance because I am gonna mess up these names. I read this in Braille and it has a lot of Chinese names and stuff like that because this author is, I believe, Chinese Canadian, and I'm so sorry in advance for messing this up. So today I am talking about Iron Widow by, I think it's Jiren J. Zhao or Ziren J. Zhao. I don't really know, but I think it's Jiren J. Zhao. Yeah, we're gonna go with Jiren J. Zhao. So yeah, I do have a little bit of familiarity with with their content. I have watched their videos on YouTube a little bit. I watched uh, I watched some of her Chinese history videos, especially the Wu Zetian videos that was like a two-part video series, which I thought was really interesting, and the way that she like tells us that they tell us the history of China was really interesting. So I do have some familiarity. However, that does not necessarily detract um from my review and the way I read books. So I just wanted to let you know that I do have some familiarity. They became very famous, from my understanding, on YouTube because they basically created their channel originally only to they originally only created this channel to basically say to talk about the live action remake of Mulan that came out in 2020 and how it was not good representation of China and all the fun stuff and how it could have been fixed. And I guess they got famous from there and they continued on with their YouTube channel. I have not watched a lot of their content. I saw their Avatar The Last Airbender analysis and I thought it was wonderful and very informative and I very much enjoyed it. So let's talk about no, no. Thank you, Aylin. So let's talk about the book. So here's the description. The boys of Huasha, Huasha, Huasha. I think it's how to pronounce it because I can pronounce it Huaxia for a while, but I'm gonna say Huasha. Huasha dream of pairing up with girls to pilot chrysalises, giant transforming robots that can battle the mecha aliens that lurk beyond the Great Wall. It doesn't matter that the girls often die from the mental strain. When 18-year-old Zetian offers herself up as a concubine pilot, it's to assassinate the ace male pilot responsible for her sister's death. But she gets her vengeance in a way nobody expected. She kills him through the psychic link between pilots and emerges from the cockpit unscathed. She is labeled an Iron Widow, a much feared and much silenced kind of female pilot who can sacrifice boys to power up chrysalises instead. Okay. To tame her unnerving yet invaluable mental strength, she is paired up with Li Shamin, the strongest and most controversial male pilot in Huasha. But now that Zetian has had a taste of power, she will not cower so easily. She will miss no opportunity to leverage their combined might and infamy to survive attempt after attempt on her life until she can figure out exactly why the pilot system works in its misogynistic way and stop more girls from being sacrificed. So, okay, I want to say, quick disclaimer, if you love this book, I'm happy for you. I really am. I can see the things that there are things about this book that I like. There are others. Not so much. I think it's important to state that I, at least when reading this book, came in with a lot of expectations as well. And I was very, very, very excited to read this book because it sounded super awesome. It sounded like amazing. So I was very excited to get to this book and read everything pretty much. I was very excited to finally be reading this book. I had been looking for it for a short time and I really couldn't find it. And it just eventually I found it in Bookshare and I read it. But as I went through the story, my expectations kept getting lower and I started getting extremely disappointed with the books, with the story itself. I think there is a lot here and there was a lot of potential that just did not happen. And due to that, the story felt lackluster and as though there was more that could have been done. And I will try my best to articulate this in as best as I can. I don't think it's going to my review, I haven't looked at reviews for this, but they seem to be it seems like they might be they seem to be polarizing, but I'm not too sure. I have not looked at reviews for this. I started and I saw a 1-star and a 5-star review, which I didn't fully read. And I know that the author themselves also made a review on the book on Goodreads and gave it a 5-star thing. And to me, okay, good. I think you should be proud of your work. I will say, however, that I do not believe that this book did what it originally intended to do. The plot seemed to have been very ambitious, and it wasn't covered in the amount of time that in the amount of pages that it should have. There is a lot for this very short book. It's only 394 pages. I call it short in the fact that it was too short for the story it was trying to tell, and I also think it could have been done much better. I will probably refer to this. I might refer to this in spoilers, but I'm not sure, or some spoilers at least, maybe broad spoilers, if you will, but I am not too sure how much of that will happen. I will let you know. I don't know if I will. But for now, we're still in spoiler free and we're still safe. So the one thing I will say is that the pacing and writing of the story are the first few things that jump out at me. I think there are some phrases in this book that are very odd to me, but also not bad. And stuff like that. By the way, I might talk about how I would I might make some comparisons in this review, and I'll let you know when I do. So I found some things odd, but not bad. I think they were just interesting to read, but it's like, okay, it's there, you know what I mean? One of the things that this book does is that it starts off with a prologue in third person, in the point of view of the guy who killed her sister, whose name we don't know. Literally, the main character, Jetian, refers to her as Big Sister. So I don't know why. And Shamin also refers to his brother as Big Brother. I also don't know why we don't just have names. I'm very confused as to why that is. I actually, considering everything in the story, think that this prologue was very much useless. There was no reason to have it. And if you were going to have a prologue, it would have probably been best to have it in the sister's point of view. I think that the pacing in this story has both pros and cons. The pro is that there is always something happening. Always. There is never a dull moment. So if you like that, yeah, it's there. There is never a dull moment. Something is always happening. There is no there is no way that it just doesn't happen. Like there's something happening always. There's always something happening. And I think that's a pro. However, due to the way that the story is told, I believe that this kind of pacing doesn't fit the story very well, in my opinion, because there is a lack of a lot of things in the story, and I think the writing and pacing have a lot to do with it. Um, it would have been better for the story to have slowed down. It does not slow down. It is a very fast paced story. And I think a lot of it has to definitely do with the fact that it is a YA novel. Some YA novels, most of the time, tend to be, at least in my experience reading YA novels, tend to be very fast paced books. Very few YA novels are slow burn and take their time. YA novels just tend to be very fast paced. It's a part of the category, or the age category, I guess. However, after reading this book, I decided to kind of get some closure, and I was reading the acknowledgments of this book. And one of the things mentioned in this book is that, in the acknowledgments, is that the original first draft of this story was actually very dark and could not be marketed as YA. It's basically implied and told to be in the 18 plus category / rated R, and that it was very much problematic. And if this is what if she does not consider, if the author, or they, I'm gonna say they, I keep going back to she and they, I'm sorry. If they do not consider what they have written problematic, I find it really interesting, because there are a lot of things I consider problematic in this book. I want to say this here. I said it in another review, which you will not see for a while, but I'm going to say it here. If I'm telling you about anything problematic in books, I'm not doing this to push you away from the books. I'm simply acknowledging that it is problematic, because I may enjoy some problematic stuff too once in a while. I do enjoy some problematic stuff, and I get it. But what I want to say is that I am doing this though to acknowledge that it is problematic. While books and fiction don't necessarily exist in a vacuum, they kind of do in a way, because fiction is also meant to be more for escapism than anything else. However, fiction can also influence people's lives, and I feel like the issue is that for some reason some people don't seem to not be like looking at fiction with the lens of that's fiction and this is real life. So that is a thing to be said. I am not someone who is a proponent of not reading problematic books. If you're interested in reading any books as problematic as they are, it doesn't matter. That's up to you. If it gets you to read, I genuinely don't care. If you enjoy it, okay, cool. But I at least don't always do that. I do enjoy some problematic content once in a while. Actually, I have problematic content I like. I know that. There is problematic content I like. However, I like to acknowledge at least that it is problematic, but and just acknowledge that it is, and just continue enjoying it. And the reason I'm mentioning it in this review though, it is to mention that there is stuff that is problematic to me in this story, but also to tell readers about these problematic things that are presented. Now, I'm not shaming you. I'm not saying you shouldn't read these problematic representations. Go right ahead. I very much do read problematic things once in a while, and I'm going to talk about one of those things in a little bit when I talk about one specific problematic aspect of story eventually. So in the acknowledgements, the author did mention that what she wrote and she sent to her agent, she said it was what they wrote is that they sent it to the agent and they said it was too dark to be marketed as YA, and I guess the author rewrote it to fit more of the YA stuff. You can kind of see that though, because there are hints of darkness. There is even an entirely dark scene. It was very very dark where when it comes to the book. But the things that I found while reading the acknowledgments is that I do think this book would have been better if it was darker and if it was not marketed toward YA. I don't think this book fits YA because it was supposed to be darker and it basically got watered down to be more YA. And that, reading the acknowledgments, I mean, I felt this before, but like the writing did feel watered down. The aspects of the story were both glossed over and watered down a little bit. So you can kind of, after reading the acknowledgments, I did look back in my head. I'm like, yeah, it is very much watered down to fit a genre which really doesn't really fit into it that much. It could have been so many, there could have been so many things that could have been explored in this, and it just wasn't because of that. And if there were other ways that it could have been explored in YA as well, but that did not happen, and I am very disappointed in that because I feel like this book had so much potential in so many ways. So I'm gonna start talking about it, I guess, in some of the things that I found kind of interesting. And one of the big things is that the motivation for Zhetian's story is established. However, she also kind of forgets about it in a way. Like I think we're supposed to root for her, but it's very difficult to do so because Zhetian is a very much raging woman who's just raging against the patriarchy, which, girl, same. I relate a little. I can understand the rage. And while I personally understood the rage, and while I personally related a little bit to the whole raging feminist and like raging against the patriarchy and being like, fuck the patriarchy, I do whatever the fuck I want. Though I can relate to that, it was not established well. And by the end of it, there's a lot. So one of the things that we have is that we have her wanting to take vengeance for her sister's death. But we don't know anything about the sister. We genuinely don't. We can't. I don't know anything. Like, I don't care about the fact that the sister died because there is nothing. There is nothing for me to hold on to. There is no establishment of. There is no nothing to the sister. We have no bond to them. We just know that she. Okay, so essentially, the sister was basically fridged. So fridging is a concept in where a character, usually female, is killed off to better another character, usually male, and it's supposed to make them like a better person in the end, and it's supposed to change them. So it's usually done in order to make people better. And that is supposed to be, and that essentially is what the big sister was basically, the sister was kind of done. But we don't even get to see the sister in flashbacks. The sister only appears in a dream. Now, if you wanted to start the story there, which I usually like to start my story in the middle of things that are happening most of the time as well, one of the things, the tool I use the most is flashbacks. I am an excessive flashback user, and I will admit it freely. So when using flashbacks, what the author could have done is used flashbacks to establish the family relationships when it comes to at least between the sisters. And actually to establish more of the family dynamic, because we didn't get enough of the family dynamic. All we got is that the family was really abusive and they bound her feet, because there is foot binding in this stuff, and it's basically where they break the women's feet, and they have to, I guess, to fit the illusion of small feet, I think was the main thing. So her feet were broken when she was 5. Zhetian's feet were broken when she was 5, and now she kind of walks in pain. every time, and she has to take care of them pretty much every day, I think, or every night or whatever. So it is a very interesting thing to kind of talk about. It's not that's the one thing that's not glossed over. It's talked about how she feels pain for it. She feels pain when she walks, and how it's not really walking. So it would have worked. These flashbacks would have worked to fit family dynamics, and to kind of build up Jetien's growing resentment toward pretty much everything, because everything that she does, her actions don't feel like we don't always have a motivation for her actions. It's just the fact that, oh yeah, I'm a feminist, fuck the patriarchy, I get to do whatever I want. That's kind of like the main thing. But we don't get to see the way how she became like this. We are left to assume that, her life made her like this, that no matter how much she tried to be, complacent and maybe follow in, I guess, in footsteps or whatever, and follow maybe even her own, and follow, I guess, everything that she was being taught, things changed. So she's like, I wanted things different. So we're left to assume that's the case, but it is also possible to say, it's also possible, however, that it's also possible, however, that because you're so indoctrinated into a system, you will believe what that system says. A very good stories that I will consider. One of the things is Blood and Ash. The Blood and Ash series starts off with Poppy as a character being very, she was very much indoctrinated and very sheltered and everything, and she was very much indoctrinated into the system of the ascension and all that stuff. Like, she believed everything that was being told. Like, she saw she saw that things were wrong and she wanted to make change, but she did essentially believe the ascended in what they were doing, and that they were doing the right thing. She did genuinely believe that, until she kind of went out and saw the real truth of who they were and how they fully treated people. And it took a while for her to really understand that everything that she was being told was a lie, even though she was kind of seeing it. But she was so heavily indoctrinated that she refused to believe most of it. And I thought that was, and that's one way to do that. And that is something that could have worked for Jetien, because she was abused, but she could have also shown some. But we also don't get to see the repercussions of that abuse in her. We get to see her rage, which is probably why she's angry, the abuse, but we also don't get to see how it may have affected her emotionally in other ways. And I think that's one of the things that's missing. So one of the things I remember that I read years ago was the Conqueror Saga by Kirsten White, and the first book is And I Darken. And I remember very clearly giving it 2 stars. It's the rating is 2 stars in Goodreads, and I will probably reread it and change it, because one of the things I did that I basically disliked about it was that it took very long. It was a very long book, and we started from the very beginning of Lada's life, and we got to see, and I didn't appreciate this, but it would have actually been good, and we got to see the build up to her becoming who she was. We got to see the build up. Like, it was a very slow book. Like, the first book in the Conqueror Saga is really a setup for the other 2 books, and it was a very slow build up, and at the time I didn't appreciate it for what it was. But that is something that I think this book needed. I think this book needed to be longer, and it just needed to be the build up to Jetien. So start from the beginning and then end the book maybe at the sister's assassination. And ending the book at a sister's assassination would have been a way to... Give me 1 second. Guys, I'm back. Okay, so yeah, I think this book would have been good if Jetien, basically, we kind of got to see her life from the very beginning. We got to see it building up. We got to see her relationship with I think it's EG, or something in that form. EG. I think I used to pronounce it Yeezy, but I'm pretty sure it's Yeeji. So it would have been interesting to see her build up to the relationship with Yeeji and the way that she started learning stuff, and basically see a setup and just end it at the sister's assassination. And then this story, which would have been the second book, would have been just telling us, that she enlisted and do all this stuff, but we would have known more about the family dynamic, and it would have allowed some world building, because this book does lack world building. The main thing that we have a basic form of the book, but we also don't have much to go on in the world. The main thing that is really pushed on is how the women are oppressed in this world, and how concubine pilots, basically the women, die more than the men, and how they basically kind of use them as batteries in a way, in order to power the chrysalis. And I think that this is an interesting concept, but I don't think the author did enough to develop it, and it was very ambitious, and it was way too short for this, for what she wanted to do, and it may not be enough books. I think the last book is supposed to be Heavenly Tyrant, which I will give a blind anticipates thing, because I still will be reading the sequel even with these problems. Or if the author wanted to start with the incident already, it would have been good. This would have benefited from a couple of pages longer, where we could have had flashbacks of the family dynamic, and flashback at least of the sister, and see how they were, because we don't get to see that. So the fact that she is quote unquote grieving for her sister is hard to believe when we don't really get to see the sister, with the exception of one dream. And it just doesn't seem to be something that happens often. Like in this story, like we don't get to see her really. We don't get to kind of get to know the sister. We don't get to see the bond. We just are told that this is something that happens. There's nothing here that is kind of, we don't get to see that. So it's hard to believe in the sister being someone we need to care about. Another thing that this book lacks is really a character arc for Zhetian. She kind of starts out raging and she continues raging. Literally the end of the book, spoiler, ends up with her kind of conquering her country or and everything. And it is a lot. So yeah, it's a lot. It's genuinely a lot. So that's a thing that I can say. Like it would have worked if we had like a setup story, or at least get flashbacks of the people. Another thing that we have is that we are told there are a lot of things that make no sense, that they're just not clear when it comes to the world. I said there's no world building, and also Zhetian knowing some of this stuff. There are some political things that happen that make no sense that she would know these political moves, and it would make no sense that she knows all this battle strategy. The reader is kind of left to assume, and it is implied in the book, that she learned all this stuff through her boyfriend Yiji. Like they met at 15, and they've been seeing each other for 3 years, and it is implied that they will that basically they see each other once a month. It is implied that she was able to learn all that through his tablet. He was the one that taught her to read, and I don't know how advanced her reading really is, because he taught her very late, you know what I mean? So I don't know how advanced her reading actually is. And it is implied that she learned all this through his tablet. He visited her once a month. He visited her for 3 years, once a month. It makes no sense, because there's only so much you can learn once a month. So how do you expect a reader to believe that Zhetian knows this? It is YA, so I guess if you're in YA, it can kind of be slightly, you can kind of be believable. But I also think that if we're gonna go YA and you're going to put all this stuff, if you're going to put certain things in books, I do believe that no matter how tropey YA is, something like this is kind of an insult to the reader, to your not your adult reader, your teenage reader. Because quite frankly, teenagers are a lot more intelligent than YA literature gives them credit for. And that's like the one thing, as much as I love YA, it's one of the one things that kind of irritates me about a lot of YA. It seems to just insult the intelligence of teenagers. They're intelligent. They're not all stupid. They're intelligent as well. And I find that the fact that YA kind of insults teen readers is really annoying. There are YA books, granted, that don't do that, but the majority, I feel like there are books that seem to do that though, and I think this is one of those books. It seems to insult the reader a little, your teenage reader a little. So those are like the things that I kind of just, yeah, those are some of the things. Anyway, so lack of world building, lack of character in this end, because Zhao doesn't really have a character. And another thing about this book is that it is black and white. There are those that are good, and I guess those that are bad. Like this book is more of a female power fantasy, and I don't have a problem with female power fantasies. I think the Spanish love deception kind of fits into the female power fantasy, and I didn't like the Spanish love deception because of everything. But I think this is much of a female power fantasy, and although I have an issue with it, it gets boring because she basically gets what she wants. Very rarely does anything go wrong, and she faces no consequences for what she does. And any consequence that she faces feel very light, like extremely light. And she eventually just becomes drunk with power by the end of the book, and it feels like a lot. This book is a lot, honestly, especially with what it's trying to do. So I ended up like I said, I read like the acknowledgements for this, and there's like a lot of things that I find kind of interesting that she says, that the author says. And one of the things that the author mentioned is that she thinks some producers, I guess from a show or something, for showing her that like these like chrysalises and these like pilot machines could be a good way to explore gender, adolescence, and sexuality. And honestly, I don't think this book explored any of that. I don't think that this book explored any of that, and it didn't do. And if it did, it didn't do. It tried to, but it didn't do it well. And I don't think it did that. So I will just say that I don't think any of the exploration that the author was trying to do was done in this book, and it could have been. I think this book could have been so much better as an adult book, as the whatever problematic thing that you may have written. It should have just been marketed as an adult book, not a young adult book, because this is a lot. There is a problematic scene that I want to mention especially, and that is that, spoilers now, Zhao and Li Shimin basically take this guy and torture him. They waterboard him, I think, with alcohol and stuff like that, in order to get him to tell them the truth about why the pilot system behaves this way toward women. And they basically torture him. Eventually they use alcohol, and eventually they kill him. And it's a very cold-blooded killing. Like, it is cold. And I was like, what? Okay, it is very cold-blooded killing, in my opinion. And what's interesting about this is that it is portrayed as the fact that it works. Now, I have read books, many books, where torturing is portrayed as working, as the fact that it will reveal information if you torture someone. I have read many books, And Sarah J. Maas actually does this as well, and it is very problematic. And I'm saying this as a Sarah J. Maas stan. I will say that her torture, it's not usually explicit torture. Like, we don't get to see the torture. I think in A Court of Silver Flames we only get a slight taste of it, but we don't get to see the torture. But basically, she does portray like the fact that they were tortured and the information and interrogated by torture, and that people received information, and it is portrayed as working. But the fact is that when you torture someone, they're gonna tell you pretty much whatever you want in order to stop the torture. Torturing someone does not work to gain information. It will only make it so that they give you whatever they say whatever you want them to say, so that the torture stops. And I find that the fact that it was portrayed the way that it was, I don't like it. But I also understand that it is a trope in literature. So it is something that I want to say, that it is a very problematic scene, and that I am aware of it, and I do read books that do this. So I at least wanted to mention that it was problematic. A lot of this book, though, is harmful in the fact that, so this is not an idea I got, but it is an idea that was in a review by Unresolved Textual Tension, the podcast. Definitely look for them. It's really good. And one of the things that the guy, the male host said, or that Will said, is that this is very much harmful wish fulfillment, because it kind of says that if you were born if you were born good and you do the right things, then you're a good person, but if you were born a certain way and you do bad things, you're just a bad person. So it implies that, and I kind of believe that it does, because this book is very black and white. There is good or there is evil. And in Jetien's, there is good or there is someone who doesn't agree with me. And a very good thing was about this woman who originally Jetien originally approached this woman, one woman who, I don't know how to pronounce any of these names, you guys. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce their names. I don't even know if I read them right. Okay, we're not gonna do that. So she approached this woman who basically told her to stay away from her partner, and stuff like that, and slapped her and everything. And then this other woman who had partners and children basically approached her and offered her like makeup in case Li Shamin was beating her, because she had a bruise, and it turns out she had been attacked, though, not that Li Shamin hurt her or anything. But basically, she told her that if she needed it, she can lend her this makeup, and that she has it for the girls who, might need it, and stuff like that. So she approached her, and they kind of became, I wouldn't say friends, but kind of, at least they got along quite well. And there was a point, though, however, where this same woman with her partner ended up attempting to kill her, and they also ended up killing Li Shamin. And when Jetien confronted her about it, she's like, look, they said, they know about, my kids, it was orders, I was following orders, and that, they would kill my kids. And also tells her, if you probably should stay in line, because your family would be in danger too. And she very much killed this woman and her partner. And this is from the person who says that they wanted to make things better for girls. She is not a compassionate character. When reading Jetien comes off like a psychopath. At least the way I see it. She kind of comes off as someone who is kind of, I'll talk about it a little bit later. She's kind of like Light from Death Note, but I'll talk about it in a minute or in some time. But she comes off as someone who is very uncaring about people. So when she quote unquote is grieving, it's very hard to feel for her. And although I can agree with some actions that she takes, I cannot fully, because we also didn't see her coming up with that. There's so much that doesn't make any sense in this book that I think I've gone a lot of it. But one of the things I wanted to talk about also, that I wanted to mention, that I thought was very interesting, that the author definitely attempted to do, but I think failed miserably because of Jetien's character, is the friendships and the polyamorous relationships that come after. So we kind of get to see there is a polyamorous relationship here, between Jetien, Li Shamin, and Yiji. And I think, honestly, if you're cool, it is the first time I read a polyamorous relationship in a book. I think awesome. I'm interested. I was interested in that aspect, but the problem is that it wasn't developed well because we know that there's an established relationship between her and Yiji, that we don't even get to see how it formed. So I don't understand why they love each other, and because Yiji is kind of a sweet kid. He seems to be a soft, sweet boy. Literally, she once called him. She said she has everything she wanted: her killer boy and her sweet boy, and it was an interesting scene, to say the least. But basically, there is a polyamorous relationship between all of them. There's that polyamorous relationship, and there was really no good build up for it. Like we got to see more. I felt more tenderness between Shamin and Yiji, but because they were not given a lot of page, because they were given enough page time, but because we were mainly in Jetien's head, we didn't get to see fully what they were like in that end. But we got to kind of, we got to see we got to see kind of like a little bit how Yiji and Shamin kind of got along with each other, and how and everything, and how it worked or whatever. But what we didn't get to, what I feel about that was not executed well with this polyamorous relationship, is the fact that Jetien is extremely judgmental of everybody. And so the friendship just came off as her mostly yelling at Li Shamin, and like a lot of it, she just like insulted him. It was like, okay, so you do this, you do that, you delight in this and that, and like well, not delight, but like she kind of blamed him a lot for a lot of things, and then eventually she supposedly felt bad because she realized that she didn't give him enough credit for what he fought for. She fought more for what he fought more than she thought he did, and I thought that was okay, interesting. It would have been a tender scene if we actually felt like Jetien was a character that we could kind of, even if we didn't relate to, that we kind of knew. But I do not think we got to know Jetien in a way that feels right. I don't feel like she feels like a well-developed character or a well-rounded character. She's very flat in character, as everyone else seems to be as well. So the relationship just didn't feel real, and there was no good build up. Again, why I think this book should have been longer, and why it really shouldn't have been YA. It should have just been adult. In adult, I think it would have marketed well. So those are some of the things. By the end of this book, one of the other things that I also found is that one of the things that happens is that some of the things that happened at the end of the book, although I was entertained, just didn't make any sense. Like Yiji like killing his father in cold blood was just a lot. Like I was just like, what? yeah, I mean, we know how he acted, but he also kind of grew up with him, and we know nothing about them together. Like, there was so little. And for all she said about not about wanting to make things better for girls and all that stuff, Yiji just traumatized his sisters by killing his father in front of them because the Yiji's dad was using the girls as because he knew that Jatian apparently wouldn't attack, and he was blackmailing her. Granted, with some pictures and stuff, with a video and stuff, but like, you just traumatized little girls, and Jetian just didn't care. And even Yiji was just like, whatever, let's rule the world. You know what I mean? Like, some of the character changes that didn't feel right. They didn't feel earned. We didn't get any build up. There was just nothing. A really good YA book that does give change. I mentioned the Conqueror Saga earlier, but like a good YA book that does build up character is also Castles in Their Bones. We get to see the setup in the first book and we understand. But we just got nothing. We got raging feminist is what we got. And one of the things I found really, really interesting is that Jetian responded to people with feminist quip when they tried to put her in what they considered to be her place. And then when they respond again, she kind of continued responding with feminist quip. But also, there were very few moments where she, like, actually reasoned with herself and that what she was doing what may have been wrong. Very rarely do we see her feel any guilt for anything that she does. And one of the things also, and the reason I find this annoying, because we didn't see her build up. We didn't get to see why she became the way that she did. We got to see nothing. It's really just raging feminism, and I understand I understand the idea, rage against patriarchy, fuck the patriarchy. I get it, but there needs to be more build up and understanding as to why you're doing the things that you are. And in a book, like the build up needs to happen in the book for us to understand. So there is supposed to be a sequel. Apparently this is supposed to be a duology. Again, I feel like it could have been more of a trilogy, but okay. And I feel like this could go one of two ways. Actually, one of three. So this could go the Death Note way, where we have Death Note, we have Light, where he basically finds this notebook and decides he's going to be the god of this world. And in the notebook, it basically, what happens in the notebook, by the way, the Death Note, is that any name of a person you write, if you have like their face memorized, basically that person will die, right? So yeah, that's basically like the main thing. And then the Shinigami appears and stuff like that, and he decides, I'm gonna become the god of this world. I'm gonna get rid of crime, kill anyone. The only people that are going to be allowed in this world are those who are pure and, I guess in his own way, because he's basically judge, jury, and executioner, deserve to be in the world. However, the story as the story continues and as we see Light's journey, we see him kind of descend into more of a... We see him go deeper in his God complex, where he starts killing anybody who contradicts him or gets in his way, which is very similar to Jetian, who just will basically kill anybody who gets in her way. She killed the strategists, she killed the sages, she got rid of the palace, she killed her own family. I mean, you understand it, but she did kill them, and you don't get enough of an understanding of it, as to why she did what she did all the time. So... and then just declared herself empress by the end of the book. So the way it could go is we could see that, and we can see an ending where people destroy her, or someone basically kills her, which is what happens at the end of Light. He gets killed at the end. Spoilers, sorry. We can see a way where she realizes that which is the one I hope we get. I mean, I like the first one. Don't get me wrong. The first one is cool. The Death Note one is cool. The second one is that she realized that what she's doing is wrong, and she somehow makes amends. So and she makes amends at the end. Maybe she leaves or something. Maybe she does something, stays ruling, but makes amends in the second book for people. So or whatever. And in the third way is that what she's doing, that maybe she'll be doing good things in the second book, or she'll be doing certain things in the second book, and it'll be portrayed as good, and the world maybe will see changing and people start appreciating her. So we are supposed to be left with that fact that her actions, that the actions that she took were actually good actions, which I really hope is at the third way. I think it could be the second way, only because this is inspired by Empress Wu, who was basically the first female Chinese emperor. And she seems to have been a very complicated character, but she also seemed to have been a really good, a really good ruler who also knew how to rule. And I don't think she was necessarily I don't know if she was a good person. No one knows if she was a good person. But the things that from what I understand, is that she was definitely very complex, and that she seems to have been in general, a good ruler in ways. But also, unlike Zetian, though, Empress Wu was a whole lot more intelligent by the sounds of it. So I myself actually, by the way, got inspired by Empress Wu from learning a little bit about her from Xiran Zhao. So I actually did a little bit of my story, some of my stories, some of like the overarching stories that I'm trying to tell. So my character, some of her actions got inspired by that, but I added my own spin to it. So it was really interesting. So honestly, that's all I have to say about this book. I'm sorry this review was very long, but I hope it gave you an idea about this book. I really, really hope that if you like the book, I'm glad you enjoy it. I actually gave it 1 star, but I want to say that I would reread it again for entertainment. If I wasn't reading it seriously, I think this book is really good for entertainment. It's kind of a female power fantasy, and if you kind of turn off your brain, this book might actually be good. This book is actually good when I turn off my brain, and I think that's what this book is good for, like that entertainment book thing where I just kind of turn off my brain. It basically fits the same thing as The Savior's Champion and The Savior's Sister, as well as The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, except I think The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was a little bit better than all of them, where it's just kind of I'm gonna listen to this stuff and I'm just gonna like turn off my brain. I think that's where this book goes. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this book. Mainly spoiler free with some spoilers. So I will be talking about Heavenly Tyrant as best as I can at some point. But I hope, actually I'll probably record, you know what, I should actually record it right after this. Because why not? So I am actually going to do that. Let me know your thoughts. Would you read Iron Widow? Or have you read Iron Widow? If you read it, did you enjoy it? If you haven't read it, do you plan to read it? I know I gave a pretty scathing review. I gave a very bad review on this book. I would definitely look at other reviews as well, because this is just my review. Yeah, this is just what I think about it, but definitely, until my next video, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, by the way. Consider subscribing and turning on notifications, and also check the description for links to other series I've done, as well as a link to my blog. Consider subscribing to my blog, where I share my writing and written book reviews. And a lot of these blog posts are usually out before the videos are, because of course they are, but I review more books in the channel than I do in my blog. So check that out. Check out my writing. I want to put in some creative nonfiction there too. So check out my writing in my blog, and yeah, judge it for yourself and let me know what you think. So yeah, until my next video, consume stories. Bye.